Today I'm going to give you a tour of my working pantry. It's not a prepper's pantry, but it is a working pantry, and a lot of the produce and food in the jars is stuff that I've produced on my small homestead here at Moat Cottage. It's spring here at the moment, so the shelves are actually the most empty that they would be throughout the whole year. And it's a good opportunity for me to go around and see what's on the shelves, what's left that we didn't use over the winter, and where the gaps are, what I need to be making or what I need to be growing so that I can put them in jars and preserve them and put them on the shelf for next winter. So you can come along for the journey with me. Let's take a look. Growing and preserving food is a huge part of a homesteader's life or a permaculture lifestyle. However, in between those steps is obviously harvesting and storing the food before you get a chance to actually preserve it, because you don't always have time to preserve the food on the day that you harvest. So it's a good idea to have a dedicated space and baskets or containers to be able to store your fresh produce so that it lasts a long time and it's in good quality when you go to preserve it or when you get a chance to preserve it. Here at Moat Cottage, I have 2 bench seats that I've pushed together, and I have all the different baskets and containers and crates on top for all the different types of produce. And obviously, the produce at this time of year is different to the produce in another month or another 3 months or 6 months. It's changing throughout the year. Underneath, there's more baskets with produce. Up the end is a basket with a hessian bag over the top, which is my potatoes. And they're always got to be kept dark, so that's why they're covered with the hessian bag. I have a few spare baskets here, which I can switch around depending on the size of the produce I've got out. And underneath the bench seats are some buckets, and they've got rice and different flours. I've tried to organise the pantry in a cohesive way so that I can easily find the things I want and use the things I want in some sort of order as well. Over here I have my dried staples, and it can be anything from dehydrated flowers to citrus peels, mushrooms, and then all the different fruits and vegetables that I dehydrate. So I've got things that I would use medicinally or for soaps, as well as things that I use in my cooking. Over here I have the bicarb soda and some flour varieties. Here I have some dried seeds and lentils. Then there's all my legumes, rices, and more legumes down the bottom in bigger jars that I use more of when I'm using them. And I love having them out so I can see when I need to refill the jars, as well as be inspired to choose different varieties, and you don't forget about any of the varieties you've got. These jars are things I use for canning, like citric acid, caster sugar, salt. Down here I have all my cooking sugars, so there's just a variety of sugars I use in baking and cooking. Down the very bottom I've got breadcrumbs, caster sugar, pasta and bread flour. And then in the bigger jars right at the very bottom are my cooking oats, porridge oats and flours, and they're the ones I use all the time, and I go through them a lot, so I have the bigger jars of those. All the way over here are my drinking supplies, as well as my dehydrated chili and garlic. And then there's my meat safe. In this corner I have the metal shelving units, and on these shelves I have all sorts of things, and it changes as the seasons go, like the other section. And it's amazing how much can fit in when I start canning, and I have more that has to fit into these shelves. So at the moment it's the most empty it will be because it's spring, and obviously the summer crops will start coming in and the autumn crops, and it will fill up for winter. So over here I have a container for the chicken and duck eggs, some jars that didn't fit where I was putting the jars when I did can that food, and so they're jars that I want to use up first. Some honey, pumpkins. Over here I have all my citrus jellies. So it's a variety of all the different jellies I make with the citrus trees that I grow. Everything from kumquat to lemon, mandarin, pink grapefruit, and just a mix and match of all of those types of fruits in jellies. Then I've got my red wine section, my empty white wine section, canned mandarin, pear nectar, pear butter, applesauce, citrus marmalade, preserved figs, kiwi jam, and passion fruit syrup. Raspberry jam, strawberry jam, and youngberry jam. Pickled beetroot, pickled chilies, and cherries in the middle there. Over here I have a lot of plum sauce, so I probably need to start using that up. And then I have some apricots. Down here, raspberry and rhubarb water bath canned with no sugar, and then these are all mulberries, so they've been water bath canned in water, and they're ready just to strain and use however you would eat or use mulberries in a normal recipe, whether it's a tart, a pie, a cobbler with ice cream or custard, or however you'd want to eat them. They're just really handy to crack open a jar and you've got instant fruit. There's white nectarines and white peaches, so not many jars of those left. Down here I have my dehydrators, and they're out of the way. That one was drying some herbs for me. As you saw in my other section, I like to have dried beans on the shelf, and I use them every day. But I also like to pressure can them as well, because it's easy just to grab a jar and throw them in any recipe, well, any main meal recipe when you're cooking and you want something quickly. So I'm not always slow cooking a meal all day, which is how I'd use the dry beans if I was soaking them the day before and then cooking with them all day. If you want a quick, easy recipe and you want to add something to it to give it some extra nutrition, having canned beans on the shelf is so good. And it just means you'll use them as well. I've got black beans, borlotti beans, chickpeas. There's different varieties of chickpeas here. And they're not only handy to throw into a casserole or a dish that I'm making, they're really good for quick hummus as well. And there's no added salt, or goodness only knows what they put in those cans that you buy at the shops, and it's a lot cheaper as well. And they're so delicious. I can't tell you how much nicer they are when you do them yourself. The dried bean section continues around the corner here with pinto beans and white beans or navy beans. All the beans have about 3 different names. It depends what country you're in as to what they're called. But it's a good idea to have a variety of all the beans, and they're just so good for you. So if they're cooked already, they're really quick and easy to put in a recipe. The cool thing about canned beans is you can do a whole pressure can a load of the beans and you don't have to soak them first. And you can do a variety of all the different beans in one canning load. So you can come out with 5 or 6 different varieties or more if you want. And it's sort of an exciting load, I think, because you have all the different sorts of things in one load. This basket is what I use to put my used jars in. So when I've used my jars, they get washed and then they're put in here, and it's quite full at the moment. So it's ready to go out to the shed and everything get put back in the boxes where they get stored. In here, it's a meat safe that has empty jars in it as well, or bottles. Down the bottom are some amber bottles, more amber bottles here, and they're for my kombuchas and cordials and any liquids that I'm making, drinks or whatever. And here are some more bottles that I use, and they're empty at the moment as well. This is all that's left of my tomato section, which is usually one of the biggest sections that I have in my canning area. And this is the Roma tomatoes. There's different variety of Roman tomatoes there. And then I've got salsa and portobello mushrooms, which are delicious canned. These jars are zucchini tomato chutney, and they're a mild spice. These are zucchini chutney relish. I don't know why one's a relish and one's a chutney. Maybe they're different, I don't know, I can't remember. But it's a good way to use zucchinis anyway, and this is a medium heat. So I must have put a bit more chili in these ones. And I write that on the jar because it depends who I'm serving them to as to which spice level I get out at that time. But it's a really good way to use zucchinis, because if you've grown zucchinis before, you know that you usually have an abundance of zucchinis. I do all sorts of things with my zucchinis, and making them into chutneys or relish is one way. And it's really good because tomatoes are in season at the same time as the zucchinis, as well as the chilies, and all the ingredients are coming in at the same time. So it just makes perfect sense to be making something with all of those ingredients in them. There's my empty kombucha containers. I've stopped making kombucha at the moment, but I will be starting again. There's my duck eggs here. Down here I have kumquats, and they're preserved in alcohol. Some of them are in port and some of them are in brandy, and they're really delicious. You can either use the syrup as a drink and just have little shots of the drink if you're inclined that way, or you can pop them in cooking. I like to soak my Christmas pudding in the kumquat brandy and then break it up and then put custard in it and turn it into a custard Christmas pudding that's soaked in brandy, which I think I've made in one of my videos for you before. The kumquats, I just add chocolate to them, and I've definitely got videos on that. And they are delicious. They are really good. These are my broths. I have a vegetable broth and bone broths, lamb and chicken. And I actually make bone broth every week and use it up over the week. And I haven't been canning it because I am making it every week, and I'm not having to make 2 batches at a time. I'm only making 1 batch at a time because there's not that many people in the house anymore, so I don't need to be making extra to can, so that when I'm busy, I've got an instant jar. I'm just using up the same batch that I'm using or that I'm making that week. So that's why that's a really small section, because normally that would be a whole shelf at least. Down here I have my onion marmalade. They're all onion marmalade, which is beautiful. That's my own recipe, which I do have a video on that as well if you're interested, because it is really good. You can just pull the whole lot out of the jar and pop it into a tart base, and you've got instant onion pie, and it's, oh my God, or an onion tart, and it's so good. This is mulberries. I've got more mulberries over here. I didn't realise that I had them in different sections. See, that's what happens when you don't have enough space on one shelf and you sort of separate it and then you forget. So that's not very like me. Usually I have it very well organised, so that's interesting. I need to eat more mulberries because I think we've got another few months and mulberries will be being harvested again, so I better get using them. Not a bad problem to have, that's for sure. So they're all mulberries. Down here I have pumpkin and potato. Usually pumpkin will last on my shelves all through the winter and spring, and even summer. Sometimes I've had pumpkins last up to 12 months, so I don't really need to do anything. They'll just sit there. But I do like to have a few preserved on the shelf, because sometimes you're just busy and you don't have time to be cutting up a pumpkin and cooking it, and you just want instant addition to a casserole or something, and you just want to beef it up a little bit, and you can just throw them in or strain them out and throw them in, and it's just really quick and easy. And down the bottom is all the sweet potato. This unit holds my pressure canned meats, casseroles and soups. And on top I have my pressure canner and saucepans that are everyday saucepans that are larger. Up here we have the chicken, beef con carne, borlotti beans and beef. There's bolognese, duck, roux bolognese. So that would have been beef bolognese, and this is kangaroo bolognese. And then we go into the roux con carne, silverside. I think that's all silverside. Down here I have turkey, which is actually a casserole, so it's ready for pie mix. So it's a turkey with some vegetables in it. Then I've got chicken soup with vegetables, This is my Greek chicken soup base, and all I have to do is open a jar, add in some egg white and lemon juice, and I think that's it. And then it's ready to serve. Tomato soup and tomato and lamb soup. And I don't like canned tomato soup that is from the shop. I've never liked it, but homemade, oh my goodness, it's such a treat. I love it. You can't even compare it. And then over here I have my kumquat brandy, raspberry vodka. What's that? That's a kumquat tawny. So just different alcohols that I've infused with fruits. My sage sticks underneath the candles that I've made. This is mulled wine, dried fruit, and it's all the spices and dried fruit that's ready to go into mulled wine. And then up the back I have vanilla essence, fire cider, and this is usually where I put my tinctures that I'm infusing. And then at the moment I don't have any ferments on the go, at least not out on the shelf. So they're all in the fridge at the moment. There's nothing freshly fermenting. Up here is the garlic I harvested over 10 months ago. There's about 3 or 4 varieties up there still, and they last quite well. I grow varieties that do store well, and because I'm not in a high humidity area and this area is not heated throughout the winter, so it really does store quite well in here. And I keep them in their full cloves. So if you start pulling them apart, they'll deteriorate quite quickly. But if you keep them in the full section like that, they will last. If it's a variety that will store well, that is. So I think about that when I'm planting my cloves out, what variety I'm planting, because there's no point planting something that's got to be eaten straight away and have a whole lot of it, and you can't eat it all in a short amount of time. And there's only so many different ways you can be preserving it, and it's just nice to have fresh garlic. I use it every day nearly, so that's really exciting to have up there on hand. This is my backup pantry for things that I buy at the supermarket, and it's got things that I don't even use anymore as well. So I probably need to sort through it a little bit. Down here I keep my extra oats, pasta and legumes, and then this is just a toiletry container that has spare toothpaste, toothbrushes, razors and things like that. That's just an empty bucket, so I could probably put more legumes in there because I've got some more of them to go in there. And then salt. I have a lot of different types of salt, whether it's for preserving rabbit skins and you want to dry them out with cheap salt, or whether it's pink Himalayan sea salt that I use in my cooking. Then there's this big container of water, which I don't really need because I do have water tanks, but it is a good idea just to have a container of water on hand, and I have a couple of those. And then there's washing detergent for the washing machine. This part of the pantry is ready for a bit of a clean out as well. I didn't clean up for you either, so you're getting it how it is. And I've got things that I use every day like tissues and steel wool. Then there's the oats and beans that I need to pop into containers in that other bucket that was in that other room. Up the back here are in this container are all the dried goods that go into jars that didn't fit into the jars. So if I'm ready to fill up a jar or top up a jar, I can get it out of that container there. Then I've got some white vinegar, which obviously I use for canning, a spare Christmas pudding, because you always have to have a spare Christmas pudding. I have one Christmas pudding for Christmas, and then it's good to have a backup because you never know when you're going to need it or feel like Christmas pudding. And then there's the UHT milks, which I use for guests, and then soy milk, which is what I use for myself. And then there's tissues, empty jars, and canned goods. Most of the canned goods are things that I'm not growing myself or I can't make myself. Obviously the apricots, I don't have an apricot tree, and although I do have canned goods of apricots on my shelf, it's from apricots that I buy fresh when I can get them cheap at the supermarket when they're in season. But some years are not good years for stone fruit. It could be damaged for weather. And so I always like to have backup canned apricots. And then there's things like sweetened condensed milk, evaporated milk, coconut cream, coconut milk, because obviously I don't have a coconut tree, I don't live in the tropics, and baby carrots, peas, corn, and even tomato paste. That's my pantry. And then up here is my working pantry, which I'm not going to show you because you don't need to see that. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the pantry tour and it's given you some inspiration to maybe start growing some food, planting a tree, a fruit tree of course, or a nut tree, and then getting some things canned up into jars or putting them in baskets and using the fresh produce yourself. Or even to buy a few buckets to buy bulk and store some flour and rice in. Please feel free to check out some of my other videos. I have all sorts of tutorial videos on how to make soap, to preserving, whether it's dehydrating, canning, fermenting, and all sorts of things that are happening on the homestead. So check out those videos and I'll see you in the next one. In here I've got beef bone broth cooking for the day. So while I'm making you this video, it smells very delicious in here.